Saddam's son emptied the bank the night before the bombs fell. Baghdad, Iraq, March 18, 2003. The city was holding its breath. For months, the world had watched a tense standoff unfold between Iraq and the United States. American troops had gathered in neighboring countries. Military analysts appeared on television every day predicting what would happen next. Diplomats argued. Governments threatened. Journalists filled hotel rooms across Baghdad, waiting for history to arrive. Everyone knew something was coming. No one knew exactly when. Inside the marble halls of Iraq's central bank, however, the atmosphere was different. The employees arrived at work as they always had. They checked ledgers, counted reserves, processed transactions, and tried to ignore the growing fear hanging over the city. The bank had survived wars before. It had survived sanctions. It had survived decades of political turmoil. But what was about to happen would become one of the largest bank withdrawals in history, and it would all begin with a handwritten note. Late in the evening, as Baghdad settled into uneasy silence, a convoy of vehicles approached the central bank of Iraq. The men inside were not ordinary visitors. Leading them was Qusay Hussein, the younger son of Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. Unlike his older brother Uday, who was known for his reckless and violent behavior, Qusay maintained a quieter image. He rarely sought public attention, yet behind the scenes he held enormous power. He controlled key security organizations and was widely viewed as Saddam's preferred successor. When Qusay arrived, bank officials immediately understood that this was no routine visit. He carried a message from his father. The note was simple. It instructed the bank to release nearly $1 billion in cash. There was no lengthy explanation, no legal paperwork, no committee approval. Just the order of a dictator whose word carried the force of law. The officials faced an impossible situation. Refusing Saddam Hussein was not an option. For decades, Iraq had operated under a system where loyalty was expected and disobedience could carry severe consequences. Bank managers understood this reality better than anyone. If the president wanted the money would be handed over. Immediately, workers were summoned. Vaults were opened. Stacks of currency began to emerge from secure storage. Bundles of $100 bills were loaded into boxes. Boxes were loaded onto carts. Carts were wheeled through corridors. And then the real scale of the operation became apparent. This wasn't a few $1,000,000. This wasn't even $100 million. The order called for approximately $920 million and tens of millions more in euros. The amount was so large that it required multiple trucks and several hours to move. Employees worked through the night carrying cash. Some later described feeling stunned by the sheer volume of money. Others said they knew exactly what was happening. The regime was preparing for war. Outside the bank, guards watched nervously. The world stood on the edge of invasion. American forces were positioned and ready. President George W. Bush had already delivered an ultimatum demanding that Saddam Hussein leave Iraq. The deadline was rapidly approaching. Many believed the first bombs could fall at any moment. Inside the bank, truck after truck was filled with cash. The operation continued until dawn. By the time it ended, nearly $1 billion had vanished from the country's reserves. The money disappeared into the hands of Saddam Hussein's regime. Where it would ultimately end up remained a mystery. As the sun rose over Baghdad, few ordinary Iraqis knew what had happened during the night. But the next day, the world changed. On March 19, 2003, the United States launched military operations against Iraq. The invasion had begun. Explosions illuminated the sky. Air raid sirens echoed across the capital. Residents rushed to shelters. Television networks broadcast dramatic images around the globe. The campaign known as Shock and Awe soon followed. Cruise missiles struck targets throughout the country. Government buildings shook. Military installations burned. The regime that had ruled Iraq for decades suddenly found itself fighting for survival. As chaos spread, questions emerged. Where was Saddam Hussein? Where were his sons? And where was the money? At first, few people outside Iraq knew about the massive withdrawal. The story remained largely hidden amid the flood of war coverage. Journalists focused on military advances. Television cameras followed tanks moving toward Baghdad. Every day brought new developments. The mystery of the missing cash received little attention. But as coalition forces advanced, evidence began to emerge. American officials discovered that enormous sums had been removed from the central bank immediately before the invasion. Investigators were stunned. The withdrawal was unprecedented. Even by the standards of authoritarian governments, nearly $1 billion in cash was extraordinary. Questions multiplied. Had Saddam intended to fund an insurgency? Was the money hidden in secret bunkers? Had it been transported outside the country? No one knew. Meanwhile, Baghdad descended into turmoil. Government control weakened. Looters flooded the streets. Museums, offices, and ministries were ransacked. Years of records disappeared. Buildings burned. The collapse of state authority created confusion on a massive scale. Amid the disorder, tracking the missing money became even more difficult. Some of it seemed to vanish completely. Some of it resurfaced in surprising places. Coalition forces occasionally discovered hidden caches of cash. Boxes stuffed with $100 bills appeared in abandoned buildings. Suitcases packed with currency turned up during raids. Each discovery raised more questions than answers. How much had been recovered? How much remained hidden? And who controlled it now? As Baghdad fell in April 2003, Saddam Hussein disappeared from public view. The once powerful ruler became a fugitive. His face appeared on wanted posters distributed throughout Iraq. The famous deck of playing cards issued by coalition forces featured the regime's most wanted figures. Saddam was the ace of spades. His sons occupied prominent positions as well. The hunt began. Across the country, intelligence teams searched for clues. Raids were conducted. Informants were questioned. Rumors spread constantly. One day someone claimed Saddam was hiding in the desert. The next day, another source insisted he had crossed a border. Many leads went nowhere, but investigators remained determined. The missing money remained part of the puzzle. Officials believed the cash could help support loyalists attempting to resist coalition forces. Finding it became more than a financial issue. It was a national security concern. Weeks turned into months. Then came a breakthrough. In July 2003, American forces tracked Uday and Qusay Hussein to a house in Mosul. The operation that followed would become one of the most dramatic confrontations of the war. The house was heavily fortified. The men inside refused to surrender. A fierce gun battle erupted. American troops exchanged fire with the occupants for hours. Helicopters joined the attack. Missiles struck the building. Walls crumbled. Smoke filled the air. When the fighting finally ended, Uday and Qusay were dead. The deaths of Saddam's sons represented a major symbolic victory for coalition forces. Yet many questions remained unanswered. Among them was the fate of the money removed from the central bank. Investigators continued tracing financial networks connected to the former regime. Some funds were eventually recovered. Millions of dollars were discovered hidden in various locations. Large amounts were seized during military operations. But not all of the money was accounted for. Even years later, uncertainty surrounded the full amount that had disappeared. The story gradually entered history as one of the most remarkable financial episodes associated with the Iraq War. Experts debated Saddam's intentions. Some believed he simply wanted emergency funds available if the government collapsed. Others argued he planned to finance resistance operations after losing power. Still others suggested the withdrawal reflected pure survival instinct. A ruler facing invasion wanted immediate access to liquid assets. Whatever the reason, the result was extraordinary. Few leaders in modern history had ever ordered nearly $1 billion removed from a national bank in a single night. The event captured the nature of Saddam Hussein's regime. Power was centralized to an extreme degree. Institutions existed, but ultimately they served the will of one man. When Saddam issued an order, there were no meaningful checks to stop it. No independent authority could intervene. No official could challenge the decision. The withdrawal demonstrated that reality in dramatic fashion. A handwritten note was enough to move almost $1 billion. No public debate, no legal review, no transparency, just a command and compliance. For the employees who witnessed it, the memory remained unforgettable. Many had spent their careers protecting Iraq's financial reserves. In a matter of hours, they watched an enormous portion of those reserves disappear. They could do nothing to stop it. History was unfolding around them. The consequences would echo for years. The Iraq War transformed the Middle East. Governments changed. Conflicts emerged. Millions of lives were affected. The withdrawal itself became a symbol of a regime entering its final hours. A government preparing for its last stand. A ruling family attempting to secure resources before the storm arrived. Looking back, the timing remains striking. One night, one handwritten order, $1 billion, then war. Within days, bombs were falling on Baghdad. Within weeks, the government collapsed. Within months, Saddam's sons were dead. Within the year, Saddam himself would be captured hiding near Tikrit, discovered inside a concealed underground shelter after months on the run. The money, however, became part of a larger mystery. Some of it was recovered. Some of it was spent. Some of it may never be fully accounted for. Its path disappeared into the confusion of war, regime collapse, and years of violence that followed. Yet the image remains powerful. In the final hours before an invasion that would change the course of history, trucks rolled away from Iraq's central bank under the cover of darkness. Inside them sat mountains of cash, nearly $1 billion. A fortune large enough to fill rooms. A fortune carried away because one of the world's most powerful dictators had decided he wanted it. By sunrise, the money was gone. By the next night, the war had begun. And one of the largest cash withdrawals ever recorded had already become part of history.